Hello all. Today we are going to discuss research and citation. Specifically, we are going to gain an understanding of the different types of sources, discuss the seriousness of plagiarism, learn how to properly format a references page, explain the difference between quotations and paraphrases, and examine how to use in-text or parenthetical citations to cite our sources within our paragraphs. In our last lecture, we discussed the format of informal reports, as well as how to compose concise and persuasive business writing paragraphs. Part of composing persuasive paragraphs is incorporating research into our reports through the use of citations. This process of research and citation is fairly complex. Therefore, before we begin this lecture, I want to give a brief outline of its content in order to help us conceptualize what we will be discussing and where we will be heading. We are going to begin with a discussion of different types of sources. We will then proceed to an examination of plagiarism and its significance. Once we understand the importance of properly citing our sources, we will discuss the two places where citation occurs within the report, the references page and in-text or parenthetical citations. Within the references page, we will discuss how to cite the most common sources, including journal articles, online newspapers, books, and websites. Finally, we will conclude this lecture with a discussion of the differences between quotations and paraphrases, and how to cite them within our paragraphs. Let's begin by discussing the various types of sources that are available. As we discussed in our last lecture, the stakes of business documents are extremely high. Based on the findings of a report, businesses will make decisions that either directly or indirectly affect the financial outlook of the company. Therefore, when we write a report, it is vital that we support our claims with reliable evidence. When researching, there are three categories or degrees of sources that we may find. There are unreliable sources, reliable sources, and scholarly or peer-reviewed sources. As you can see, these sources are arranged from worst at the bottom to best at the top. Let's discuss each of these levels, beginning with unreliable sources. Unreliable sources are the worst form of evidence. Currently, the most prolific source of unreliable information is the internet. While excellent and reliable information can be found online, the vast majority of websites are unreliable. All that is required to create a .com website is a computer and a domain name. Anyone can literally post anything, regardless of its validity. Therefore, aside from a few exceptions, any website that ends in .com should be considered unreliable. However, the internet can provide some reliable sources as well, some of which are .com websites. First, there are many major news and financial companies that have .com websites that provide useful business and financial information. The New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, and financial websites like Bloomberg and Forbes all have information that would be considered reliable. You can also find reliable information on governmental websites, the URLs of which will end in .gov. In addition to major news outlets and government sites, some reliable information may also be found on organization websites. These usually end in .org. However, we must be careful using this information. Many organizations have specific agendas, and therefore the information that they provide may be inaccurate or taken out of context. Whenever taking evidence from a supposedly reliable source, we should always double-check its validity by cross-referencing the information with other reputable sites. Finally, in addition to reliable internet sites, you can also find reliable information in books, magazines, newspapers, and company records. However, as with .orgs, we should check the validity of the information we find within these sources. Just because something has been printed doesn't necessarily mean that it is accurate. You can find books written by experts in a field, but you can also find books that discuss first-hand accounts of UFO abductions. Regardless of the source that you are using, it is important to be skeptical. Always verify the accuracy of your information, even if it's from a reliable source. The best form of evidence, however, are scholarly or peer-reviewed sources. Scholarly or peer-reviewed sources go through a rigorous vetting process by experts before they can be published. An individual who wants to be published in a scholarly journal or by a university press must first submit the manuscript to a panel of experts in the field who evaluate the validity of the claims. The panel then either rejects the manuscript or critiques it and returns it to the submitter for revision. This process continues until the panel of experts agrees that the manuscript's evidence, arguments, and findings are sound. Then and only then is the manuscript published. Because of this vetting process, scholarly journal articles and books published by university presses are the gold standard of evidence. These sources should be used whenever possible, as they possess the most reliable information. By understanding the different quality levels of sources, we can ensure that we select the best information for our reports. Now that we have discussed types of sources, we will move on to a discussion of plagiarism and citation. One of the most important aspects of professional writing is distinguishing our personal words and ideas from those of other sources, such as journal articles, newspapers and magazines, or other reliable sources. Failure to clearly distinguish and give credit to the words or ideas of another person is called plagiarism, and can result in severe penalties, not only in an academic setting, but also in your job. If you are caught plagiarizing in an academic setting, you may receive a 0 on an assignment, or you may even be expelled from the school. The consequences for plagiarizing during your career can be just as dramatic. If you plagiarize a report, you can be demoted or even fired from your job. Plagiarism is stealing. You would not walk into someone's home and steal a computer. We should be just as horrified by taking the words or ideas of another person without giving him or her credit. In the remainder of this lecture, we are going to discuss how to give original authors credit through proper citation, and therefore avoid plagiarism. Citing our evidence creates a link that joins our use of the information within the report to the original source where we found the information. This link allows the reader to find the original source and validate whether or not we are accurately representing the information. Citing information within a report is a twofold process. First, we have to cite the source within a references page. In addition to creating a references page, we also need to distinguish our words and ideas from other sources' words and ideas within the paragraphs of the report. This is accomplished through the inclusion of an in-text or a parenthetical citation. In order to accurately incorporate outside information within our report, we must properly cite the source within both the references page and a parenthetical citation. Let's begin by examining how to properly format a references page. Here we have a sample references page. Before we look at the specific citations, let's discuss the general formatting. If you are using any outside information within a report, you must include a reference page at the end of the document. The references should begin on a new page, or in other words, don't begin the references on the same page as the conclusion or recommendation of your report. The page should start with the word references. After the word references, we will have a list of sources that were used within the report. If you use information from a source within your paper, whether this is a direct quote or a paraphrase, you must, I repeat, you must have a citation for that source within your references page. Also, your references page should only contain sources that have been used within your report. If you used a quotation, paraphrase, or idea from a source within your report, include a citation for that source within the references page. If you did not use a source within the report, that source should not be cited within the references page. Please note that the sources are single-spaced within the references page, and that there is a double space between each source. This helps to differentiate one source from the next. Each source is also differentiated by the use of hanging indents. As you can see here, the first line of each citation is left aligned, while the subsequent lines of the citation are indented. Now, let's look at how to cite specific sources within the references page. As we previously discussed, peer-reviewed journal articles are the gold standard of credibility. Therefore, we should be familiar with the citation format for these sources. Let's take a look at the first source of this reference page, which is from a scholarly journal. For scholarly journal articles, we will begin with the name of the author. The author's last name is presented first. We then include a comma, after which we will provide the initial letter of the author's first name. If the author's middle name or initial is given, we should provide this information as well. Finally, we end the author portion of the citation with a period. If you have two authors, you will use the same format and merely include the ampersand sign between the authors. Here we have an example of an article with two authors. If you have 3 to 20 authors, you will follow this pattern, but only include an ampersand before the last author's name. Here is an example of an article with 3 authors. If an article you are citing has more than 20 authors, you would provide the first 20 authors, then provide an ellipsis, and then list the last author. Once we have provided all the author information, we then need to provide the year of publication. The year of publication should be in parentheses and should be followed with a period. The next piece of information to include is the article title. Within the title of the article, there are only 3 words that we capitalize. We capitalize the first word of the article, the first word after a colon, period, exclamation point, or question mark, and any proper nouns, such as the name of a company, country, or product. These are the only letters that are capitalized. Everything else is lowercase for the article title. We then conclude the article title section with a period. The next piece of information is the journal title. The journal title should be italicized. Also, as opposed to the article title, the journal title is capitalized normally. In other words, you will capitalize all essential words, but leave other words such as conjunctions, prepositions, and articles like a, an, and the uncapitalized. We will then end the journal title section with a comma. The next section of the entry will be the journal's volume and issue numbers. The volume number is a large group of journals, while the issue number is the specific publication in which the specific article can be found. Therefore, we will provide the volume number first, which will be in italics. We will then provide the issue number in parentheses. This will not be in italics. We will end the volume and journal number section with a comma. This brings us to the article's page numbers. We will provide the page numbers for where the article can be found, which will then be followed by a period. This brings us to the final portion of the citation, the digital object identifier. The digital object identifier, or DOI, is basically a permanent URL address. This allows our reader easy access to the exact article that we used. If your article does not have a DOI number, we should include the URL from which the journal article comes. By providing this set of information in this order, We make it easy for a reader to find and validate the information that we are providing within the report. Before we proceed on to discussing how to cite books and websites, let's quickly examine how to cite newspaper articles, as the process is very similar to a journal article. Here we have a citation for an online newspaper. For citing an online newspaper article, there are only a few differences from the citation of a journal article. First, instead of merely providing the year of publication, we also provide the month and day. The next difference is that we will include the newspaper's title instead of the journal title. We will then change the comma after the title to a period. Then, newspaper articles will not have volume, issue, or page numbers, so these can be eliminated from our citation model. Finally, we will include the URL for the article. Now that we have an understanding of how to cite journal articles and online newspapers, let's quickly look at how to cite a book before concluding with the citation of websites. The formatting for a book is fairly simple. We begin with the author's last name and first initial. We then provide the year of publication. Next, we present the title of the book. This title will adhere to the same rules as the titles of journal articles. That is, we will only capitalize the first letter of the title, the first word after a colon, period, question mark, or exclamation point, and any proper nouns. As a book is a longer work, we will also italicize this title. Finally, we will provide the publisher's name. Let's now conclude with a discussion of how to cite reliable websites. When citing a web page, we need to include as much information as possible. For instance, within this citation, you can see that an author has been provided on the web page. We will follow the same protocol for author names as we did for journal articles, by providing the author's last name and then first initial. We then will provide the date that the information was published. If we have the exact date, we will present the year of publication, followed by a comma, and then the month and day. All of this should be within parentheses and followed by a period. However, it is often difficult to find the exact date of publication on a reliable website. Often, only the year is provided. If this is the case, provide the year and leave off the remaining information, as is seen here. Sometimes, we will not even be able to find the year of publication. If this is the case, we will put a lowercase n period d period within the parentheses. This indicates that no date was given in the original source. We will then provide the title of the web page from which the information is taken. Please note the difference between web page and website. The web page title is the title of the page on which we found the information. As with our journal title, we will only capitalize the first word of the title, the first word after a colon, question mark, exclamation point, or period, and any proper nouns. The web page title will also be in italics. Before discussing the next piece of information, it is important to note that some web pages do not have authors. If an author is not provided, we must then begin the citation with the web page title, as is shown here. We then follow that title with the publication date. It is important to remember that for written works, only authors' names and article or web page titles can begin citations. We will never begin with the date of publication. However, if an author is provided on the web page, you must include it. The next piece of information that needs to be included is the website title. The website title is the overarching title of the website on which you found the information. This title should not be in italics and will be capitalized normally. We will then provide the date that we accessed the information. As website information can change, it is important to document the date that you retrieved the information. This date should provide the month, day, and year that you first accessed the information. Be sure to provide the retrieval date in that specific order. After this information, we will provide a comma, and then finally, we will have the word from followed by the URL for that specific web page. While there are many other sources that can be used within reports, having an understanding of the citation method for these sources will provide you with a foundation of how to cite the most common sources that will be used in business documents. Now that we have discussed how to cite sources in a references page, we can move on